So we're looking at species of Janthina, which is sometimes called the purple bubble snail. So there's 5 species of Janthina, and they're floating planktonic or planktic snails, which is very different than most snails. So most people think of a snail as crawling with a shell on some sort of substrate in the ocean. It would be on the ocean bottom or on rocks or something. But these snails float in the ocean their entire lives. So their foot never touches the ocean floor or any real substrate at all, ever. And they float upside down. So if you think of the shell, right, so here's the shell. This is called the apex, the swirly part. And if you think of that as the top, and then this part is the bottom, in all Janthinas, and there's 5 species, and all of them, they float upside down their entire lives. And if you're asking, how could something like this is kind of a big one. This is the biggest, pretty much the biggest they get. How could this float, right? Wouldn't it be too heavy and wouldn't it sink? And the answer is yes, but they make a bubble raft out of mucus and chitin, and their bubbles last for weeks, days to weeks to months, and so their whole life they have a raft of bubbles, males and females, that keep them afloat. It's a rare, this is the only group on Earth that does it. Janthina is the only group that makes, where males and females will both make a bubble raft, and they have the widespread range that they do. So their purpleness comes from chemicals that they get from what they're eating, and they've evolved to eat those animals that are also floating. So if you know the by-the-wind sailor, Velella, those little things that sometimes wash up, they look like a little piece of plastic, but they're purplish blue, and they wash up sometimes by the hundreds or thousands on the beaches periodically. They float along and eat those. So they'll find those and eat the tentacles from those. And also the Portuguese man-of-war, if you know what that is, like a really nasty jellyfish-like creature, that these will eat that too. So it's possible that they have adapted to eating something that no other snail was really eating. So their strategy was to float upside down and float throughout the oceans and find those things. Countershaded just means that you have different color on one part of your body versus another. This white part for the animal is facing down and the purple part is facing up. And so for a predator, if a predator's looking down, they're seeing or not seeing purple, which is blending better into the bluish of the ocean looking down on it. So if you imagine, you're flying over the ocean, you look down, it looks blue. You would not, as a potential bird predator, you wouldn't be able to really distinguish this from the ocean around it. And if you're looking at it like a fish from below, like imagine you're in a pool, and if you look up at the water surface, sometimes it looks white. And so that phenomenon is what's happening here. And so the interpretation is that they are countershaded for camouflage. Purple in a snail is relatively rare. Like most snails that have patterns are a brown, tan, sometimes combination. There's a lot of other colors too, but in snails with shells, purple is pretty rare. Not necessarily rare snail, but it can be very common when it washes up. So like for example, this lot of specimens here is from Newport Beach in Orange County. And there's 50 to 100 specimens in this. So this was one collecting event. So when they wash up accidentally, right, they don't want to be washed up. Once they're on the sand and the beach, they can't survive. They have to be floating. So that's just an example of they're in a current, probably a warm current that gets washed up in California, and then they're goners after that. So that's it. So we just get to see them sometimes with their bubble raft intact, sometimes just their shell washes up, but they can wash up by the thousands, which seems like what's happening in San Diego, or what happened in San Diego a couple weeks ago. We're not in a particularly warm ocean right now. I mean, the ocean is warming. There's no evidence that there was an event in the ocean that brought these here. It's just probably just chance and just typical ocean currents and chance that these ended up in that ocean current and ended up in Southern California. So if you see one, for yourself and for science and posterity, make an observation and upload it to iNaturalist. And iNaturalist is really easy to use. So scientists and just interested people and you can have a record of what was there. And so in time, those records might add up to something very interesting. Maybe we're seeing more of these snails washing up in Southern California, and maybe that does have something to do with water currents, right? Or maybe it has to do with global warming, or maybe it doesn't, and it's every, on average 5 years, we'll get some of these snails washing up in California.